Let's begin with the big question facing Herman Cain. Is he serious? Steve Schmidt's a former senior strategist for Senator McCain's 2008 campaign. In fact, he was the campaign manager. And Dana Milbank's the Washington Post columnist. Steve, you know the business. Does this fella look like he's in the business of running for president, Herman Cain? Is that his business, or is it something else?
Well, I've said throughout the campaign, Chris, that on any given day it resembles more of a reality show than a political campaign. You've had a lot of candidates that have gotten to the top of the national polls. Herman Cain is there today. I think he has his work cut out for him in terms of staying there because some of the statements that you ran through at the beginning, joking around, we ought to have an electrified fence on the Mexican border, saying I was only kidding it. I mean, these are just not the things that serious candidates for president of the United States say.
Well, let's take a look at what was said in Politico today on the question of whether Cain, is serious. Politico wrote, quote, now that Cain, buoyed by bulging poll numbers, is demanding to be viewed as a credible contender for the GOP nomination, Cain's greatest peril is that primary rivals, journalists, and the political world broadly will grant that wish. Very little in recent days suggests Cain is adequately prepared for the coming test on his understanding of foreign policy, on his advisors, and the origin of his most provocative ideas, and not to put a too fine a point on it, on whether he has a factual command of issues equal to what would be expected of the typical congressional candidate. Dana, I was stunned, and I will remain stunned, how somebody running for president of the United States in the wake of this disastrous war in Iraq would not know what the phrase neocon or neoconservative. I mean, it was a great tribute to David Gregory, our colleague, to put the question to him. It is no tribute to him that this guy hasn't been listening to the American debate over the war and the philosophical argument for that war. From day one to day Z, he hasn't paid attention to what this country's been involved in, a war.
Right. Well, clearly he wasn't watching Hardball for the last decade, but probably he hasn't picked up a newspaper or watched anything on TV either. The whole thing sort of reminds me of the Peter Sellers movie, The Mouse That Roared, and Herman Cain is the Grand Duchy of Fenwick who declares war on the United States and somehow wins. Here's a guy who came in basically as a lark to increase his visibility, increase his speaking fees, and then turn around and find out, oh my goodness, I'm in a dead heat with the front runner here. And you've got to think that Herman Cain himself is in a bit of panic now because of the scrutiny that's going to come this way. And I think it says less about Herman Cain than it does about this terribly distorted process that the primaries have become here, in which anybody who has basically any sort of qualification based on experience working in government is disqualified because of that very qualification.
And you're up in New Hampshire now. Have you seen hide nor hair of this fellow? Have you seen Herman Cain up there in New Hampshire at all?
See a lot of Romney posters. I was actually hanging out with poor John Huntsman today, who's just amazed that he's being... Exactly. Well, there were 55 of us, but I think a lot of them were paid to be there. But, poor John Huntsman, 2 times a governor, ambassador to China, terrific resume and record, and he is being topped by the pizza man. He can't believe it.
Actually, when you mentioned Peter Sellers, I was thinking of Being There, the Jerzy Kosinski movie. I thought, my God, this guy has just talked his way into something big. Over the weekend, Cain took heat for these comments about an electric fence running along the Mexican border. He later said he was joking, but you decide. Let's watch.
We'll have a real fence, 20 feet high, with barbed wire, electrified, with a sign on the other side that says, it can kill you.
Well, maybe that should be on the sign of a presidential campaign. Anyway, yesterday he was asked about those comments. First, he again said he was joking, but later in the news conference in Arizona, he seemed to suggest he was actually serious about the points, like the electric fence. Let's watch.
Let me first say it was a joke, and some people don't think that it was a good joke, and it's probably not a joke that you're supposed to make if you're a presidential candidate. I apologize if it offended anyone. Mea culpa, mea culpa, mea culpa.
You said it was a joke. It didn't sound like a joke on the video.
Well, I think we're splitting hairs here. You're right. I don't apologize for using a combination of a fence, and it might be electrified. I'm not walking away from that. I just don't want to offend anybody.
Steve, do you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm? I think we're watching a Larry David impression here. You know, that apology he's forced to make, and then he says, well, I really don't want to make an apology, so I'll give a lousy one, and then not really make it an apology. What was he doing there? Does he want an electric fence that says it's kill you if you try to climb over this thing to make his point as a hardliner, which it seems like he wants to do, laugh at it afterwards, and that's supposed to take the heat off him? What's he doing here in this presidential campaign, this guy?
I think he's making it up as he goes along every day from news conference to news conference. There doesn't seem to be a particular rhyme and reason to it, but I do think that's going to start to change because, Chris, he is going to get the scrutiny that the front runner in the race deserves to get from the journalists, but also from his competitors, because if you're Rick Perry, if you're Newt Gingrich, if you're Rick Santorum, you're not going to grow your poll share out of Mitt Romney's piece, which has been very stable. You have to take your numbers to grow out of Herman Cain. So I think you're going to see the other candidates start to go at Herman Cain, start to go at him on the national security missteps, start to go at him on the regressive tax plan that he's put forward, and to start to put him under some real scrutiny with a lot of these comments that don't make a lot of sense.
You got to wonder about our democracy. It's come down to the president, who's got real political challenges facing him, Dana, real challenges in terms of unemployment, normally the kind of number that would cause you to be defeated in an objective sense. And then you've got Mitt Romney, who's already been rejected roundly by the political party. He has nothing to do with the political movement that's dominating the Republican Party. In fact, they detest him. And then this guy that has absolutely no political experience and is proving it every minute. Yesterday, Cain was asked whether his campaign was serious. What a question. Here was his answer. Let's watch.
One myth is that I'm not in this race to win it. That I'm just trying to get my profile up so I can get a TV show or a radio show. If you know Herman Cain, you know that that's nothing is further from the truth. And if you don't believe me, I invite you to get a copy of my new book, This is Herman Cain. No, if you can find one, because they are selling like hotcakes.
Well, there he goes again. Is he serious? He makes a joke about his own lack of seriousness. What is it, Dana?
Right. And
how do we take this? As a lounge act or what?
Exactly, and his campaign is, in fact, buying his book, so it has some
I see that. They spent $36,000 to buy the book and then hand it out, I guess.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It has some immediate benefit for him, too. But, all along, the appeal of Herman Cain is that he's the unpolitician. He's the anti-politician. So it's endearing that he can't say Uzbekistan. And it's endearing that he makes these gaffes. But at some point, you stop sort of being the outsider and the iconoclast, and you just start to look like a nincompoop who can't answer the questions. And I think he has reached that point now, and it's no longer enough to say, I'm not a politician, what do you want from me? He's going to actually have to answer the questions.
Well, why don't we get serious ourselves here, Dana? You first, then Steve. We're talking about trying to find the man, woman, Republican, Democrat, Independent, whoever it is between now and next November, who can perhaps offer a challenge to the president and come off as, to the American people, a reasonable option. That's what everybody who's an American wants to see. A reasonable option so that when they go in the voting booth, even if they're red hot for Obama, they face a reasonable option. So they have a choice. It seems to me that's a reasonable American ambition here. And yet we've narrowed it down to one of these guys. I got to go to Steve on this. You've been in the business, Steve. Doesn't it bother you that the process has led to this pathetic set of options at this point already? 2 or 3 months before the first test, it's narrowed down apparently to Romney in this character.
It does bother me, but one thing that I'm hopeful about and optimistic about is the role that New Hampshire plays in this process. People in the state of New Hampshire take this process deadly seriously, and they demand to see these candidates multiple times, to see them in the town hall meetings, to shake their hands, to check them out, to look under the hood. And I think that, he's going to have to go up there and undergo that scrutiny. And I think that, a lounge act is a great way to describe this to this point. And
no, I don't think he is, but he's acting like it. Right. The jokes he keeps telling Dana suggest he's not serious. I'm not saying he's not a serious person. He obviously is. Right. It bugs me that he doesn't seem to be taking it seriously.
Right. I mean, he has exploited this process. It's less of a primary process right now than some sort of a primal scream when you have, one protest after another, whether it's going to be Bachmann or Kaine or Perry. And I think Steve is right about New Hampshire being sort of the saucer that's going to cool this down. Now, that's certainly what the aforementioned John Huntsman is hoping by putting all his eggs here. But it also could have, look, Romney is a far more reasonable choice than a lot of these other characters, and he's 30-something points ahead here in New Hampshire.
Huntsman looks like Disraeli compared to this crowd. Anyway, thank you, Steve Schmidt. Thank you, Dana Milbeck. And that means good, anyway.